There is something that no one warns you about when you're young. Something that life only reveals slowly, quietly, like a knife entering without you noticing. And that thing is this. The lie that destroys you the most is never the one that someone else told you. It's the one you told yourself. 4 years. With full conviction. With all your heart. That's what we need to talk about today. Not about the lies of others. Not about betrayal. Not about deception from the outside. But about that quiet, patient, invisible voice inside you. The one that whispered things you wanted so badly to believe, and that you listened to, because it was easier than facing the truth. Because the truth, sometimes, is simply too heavy to hold alone. You have spent years, maybe decades, building a version of yourself that you showed to the world. A version that seemed strong, that seemed certain, that seemed to have everything under control. And deep inside, in the silence of the night, you knew something wasn't right. You knew there were things you had been avoiding, conversations you had been postponing, feelings you had been burying beneath work, beneath routine, beneath the noise of daily life. And you told yourself, I'll deal with that later. Now is not the right time. Everything is fine. I'm over it. I don't need to talk about this. I've already made peace with what happened. But you hadn't. And the weight of that, the weight of carrying something you pretended didn't exist, that weight never truly disappears. It only changes shape. It becomes distance in your relationships. It becomes tiredness you can't explain. It becomes that vague sadness that arrives on quiet afternoons, when there's nothing to distract you from yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote something that took me a long time to truly understand. He said that almost nothing disturbs us as much as our own judgments about things. Not the things themselves. Our judgments. Our interpretations. Our stories. And what is a self-deception, if not a story we decided to believe? Because the alternative, the truth, demanded something from us we weren't ready to give. It demanded courage. It demanded humility. It demanded change. And change, when you've built an entire life around a certain belief, feels like destruction. So we keep the lie. Not because we are weak, but because we are human. Because we are tired. Because sometimes, surviving feels like enough. But here is what I want you to sit with today. Really sit with. Not every lie we tell ourselves comes from cowardice. Some come from love. Some come from a desperate need to protect ourselves from a pain that felt unsurvivable. Some come from a moment in life when we simply had no tools, no strength, no safe place to fall apart. And so we built a wall. And we called that wall, I'm fine. And we painted it over with routines, with obligations, with years and years of moving forward without ever actually stopping to look back. There is no judgment here. There is only recognition. Because if you are listening to this right now, if something in these words is making your chest tighten in a way you can't quite explain, then maybe, just maybe, part of you already knows what I'm talking about. Part of you has been waiting for someone to say this out loud. Not to shame you. Not to accuse you. But to remind you that the lie was never the end of your story. It was just the place where you stopped, for a while. Seneca, one of the wisest minds that ever lived, wrote this to a friend. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And I have thought about that line more times than I can count. Because so many of the lies we tell ourselves are not lies about what happened. They are lies about what we are capable of surviving. We tell ourselves we can't face that conversation. We tell ourselves it's too late to change. We tell ourselves the damage is permanent, the distance is irreversible, the relationship is beyond repair, the wound is too old to heal. But that is not the truth. That is fear dressed up as truth. And there is a profound difference between the two. Fear says, you can't handle this. Truth says, you haven't tried yet. Fear says, it's too late. Truth says, it is still today. Fear says, no one would understand. Truth says, you haven't let anyone in far enough to try. I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer it honestly. Not out loud, not to me, but to yourself. In the quiet place inside where no one can hear you. When was the last time you sat in complete silence and let yourself feel something you had been avoiding? Not fixing it. Not solving it. Not turning it into a task or a prayer or a plan. Just feeling it. For most people, the honest answer is, a very long time ago. Maybe never. Because we live in a world that rewards movement. That celebrates productivity, achievement, forward motion. A world that has no patience for stillness. No language for the kind of grief that doesn't have a name. No space for the kind of confusion that comes from carrying too many contradictions for too long. And so we keep moving. And the lie keeps traveling with us. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and became one of the greatest teachers of the human soul, said something that I believe is one of the most important truths ever spoken. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Now, most people hear that and think it means, stay strong. Don't fall apart. Keep it together. But that is not what he meant. What he meant was this: you have a choice. Not about what life brings you. Not about the losses, the betrayals, the disappointments, the years that passed in ways you didn't expect. But you have a choice about how you meet them. Whether you meet them with honesty, or with avoidance. Whether you meet them with courage, or with a comfortable, familiar lie. And that choice, that quiet, daily, almost invisible choice, shapes everything. It shapes how you love, how you forgive, how you age, how you eventually leave this world. If this reflection is landing somewhere real inside you right now, if you feel something stirring that has been still for a long time, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and leave your like. Not because of numbers, but because when you do that, this kind of reflection reaches someone else. Someone sitting alone somewhere, carrying the same weight you carry. Someone who needs to hear that they are not the only one. And that matters more than you know. I also want to mention, gently without any pressure, that in the comments of this video, I left something for you. Something simple. A reflection that goes a little deeper into this feeling we are touching right now. Not to overwhelm you. Not to push you. Just something to return to in a quiet moment when you want to keep walking through this slowly. Because some things deserve more than one sitting. Some truths ask you to come back to them more than once. And so, before we go deeper into what the lie actually costs you, before we walk into the part of this reflection that might be the hardest to sit with, I want to leave you here, at the edge of this first moment, with just one thought. The lie that has lived inside you the longest was never stronger than you. It only felt that way because you were carrying it alone. And today, you don't have to. There is a price for everything we carry without looking at it. And most people spend an entire lifetime paying that price without ever truly understanding what it is they are paying for. The lie you have been telling yourself, whatever shape it takes, whatever name it wears, does not stay quietly in one corner of your life. It spreads. Slowly, yes. Gently, almost. But with absolute certainty, it touches everything. It touches the way you speak to the people you love. It touches the way you receive kindness, because somewhere inside you, you have decided that you do not deserve it. Not fully, not yet, maybe not ever. It touches the way you look at your own reflection, the way you judge your past, the way you approach the future with a kind of tiredness that goes beyond the body. Because that is what unacknowledged truth does to a person. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with noise or drama. It simply wears you down, day by day, year by year, until one morning you wake up and you feel a heaviness that you cannot explain to anyone, because explaining it would mean admitting things you have spent years carefully avoiding. And so you say you are tired. You say it is the weather. You say it is your age. You say it is just one of those days. But in the deepest part of yourself, the part that still speaks with absolute honesty when everything else is quiet, you know it is something else entirely. You know it is the weight of what you have not yet allowed yourself to face. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, words that were never meant to be read by anyone else, words he wrote only for himself. In the dark hours of a life full of responsibility and pain, he wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And what strikes me about that, every single time I return to it, is the word right. Not just the word true. Because he understood something that we often miss. That the lie is not only something we speak outward. It is something we do. Every time we act in a way that contradicts what we know to be real inside us, we are lying. Every time we smile when we are broken. Every time we say, "It doesn't matter," when it matters more than we can bear. Every time we stay in something, a silence, a distance, a dynamic, a habit, that we know is slowly diminishing us, we are choosing the lie over the truth. Not because we are bad people, but because we are people who learned, somewhere along the way, that the truth was too costly. That honesty brought consequences. That vulnerability opened doors to pain. And so we learned to protect ourselves. We learned to manage. We learned to perform a version of okayness that kept the world from asking too many questions. And for a while, that works. For a while, it is enough. But time is patient in a way that we are not. And eventually, what we refuse to face comes back. It always comes back. Not to punish us, but because the soul does not forget. The soul does not move on simply because the mind insists on it. The soul keeps the receipt of every truth we refuse to honor. And it presents it to us, not in grand moments of crisis, necessarily, but in the small, quiet, undeniable ways that life has of reminding us what we have left unfinished. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Recede into yourself as much as you can." And for years, I read that as an instruction toward solitude, toward withdrawal, toward contemplation. But I think now that what he meant was something more uncomfortable than that. I think he meant, go inward and actually look at what is there. Not the curated version of yourself that you present to others. Not the version you describe when someone asks how you are doing. The real one. The one that exists underneath the titles, underneath the roles, underneath the decades of accumulated identity. The one that still carries the confusion of choices made in moments of weakness. The one that still wonders, sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day, whether things could have been different. Whether it is too late. Whether there is still time. And here is what I want to say to that part of you, the one that is listening right now, the one that is maybe a little more awake than it has been in a long time. It is not too late to be honest with yourself. Not about anyone else. Not about circumstances you cannot change. But about the story you have been living inside. Because that story, the one built on the comfortable lie, on the protected half-truth, on the polished surface over the unspoken feeling, that story is not your final chapter. It is only the chapter where you got stuck. And getting unstuck does not require a dramatic event. It does not require a perfect moment or the right words or someone else's permission. It requires only one thing. One quiet, courageous act of internal honesty. The decision to say to yourself, in the privacy of your own heart, I know what this really is. And I am ready to stop pretending otherwise. That moment, that single, silent moment of surrender to the truth, changes something. Not everything at once. Not in a way the world will immediately see. But something inside shifts. Something that has been clenched for years begins, slowly, to release. And in that release, there is something that surprised me the first time I felt it. Because I expected pain. I expected the crash that comes after the wall comes down. And yes, there is some of that. There is grief in finally acknowledging what you lost by living inside the lie. There is a kind of mourning for the time spent maintaining something that was never real. But beneath the grief, and this is the part that no one tells you, beneath the grief, there is relief. A relief so deep and so quiet that it almost feels like coming home. Like returning to a room in yourself that you had locked years ago and convinced yourself you had no reason to enter. And when you finally open that door, you find that the room is not what you feared. It is not a chamber of shame or a hall of failure. It is just you. The real you. The one who has been waiting, with extraordinary patience, for you to finally stop running and simply arrive. I want to pause here for a moment, because I think this is exactly the kind of reflection that deserves to be carried slowly. And I want you to know that in the comments of this video, I left something for you. A small book. One that walks gently through exactly this kind of internal work, this process of returning to yourself, of dismantling the lies that have quietly shaped your life. It is not a self-help guide. It is not a list of steps or strategies. It is something softer than that. Something that reads the way a conversation with a trusted friend feels, unhurried, honest, and full of the kind of understanding that only comes from someone who has been through the same darkness and found, on the other side of it, something worth holding on to. If any part of what we are touching here today feels like something you want to continue exploring in your own time, in your own quiet space, I genuinely believe that book will meet you exactly where you are. You will find it in the comments, waiting for you without any pressure. And if this reflection is speaking to something real inside you, if you feel it landing in a place that has been waiting a long time to be reached, I want to invite you once more to leave your like and subscribe to this channel. Because someone, somewhere, is carrying this exact weight right now. Someone is sitting in the silence of their own unacknowledged truth, not knowing that words like these exist to meet them there. And your small action of engagement is what makes it possible for that person to find this. That is not a small thing. That is an act of quiet generosity toward a stranger who needs it. Now, before we move into the final part of this reflection, the part about what actually waits on the other side of the lie, I want to ask you something. And again, this is not a question for me. This is a question for you, held privately, in the place where you are most honest with yourself. Ask yourself, what is the lie I have been living most loyally? Not the small ones. Not the daily courtesies we all perform. The deep one. The one that, if you admitted it fully, would require you to change something. To let go of something. To forgive something. Maybe yourself most of all. Sit with that question. Don't rush to answer it. Don't rush to soften it or explain it away. Just let it rest in you, the way a stone rests at the bottom of still water. Quiet. Heavy. Real. Because that question, that honest, uncomfortable, liberating question, is the beginning of something. Something that no lie, no matter how long it has been tended, can survive forever. And you are ready for it. Even if some part of you is not sure yet. You are here. You are listening. That is already the beginning of a courage you may not have given yourself credit for yet. And that matters. More than you know. There is something that happens to a person who finally decides to stop living inside a story that was never fully true. Something that is difficult to describe to someone who has not yet experienced it, because it does not arrive the way we expect healing to arrive. We expect it to come with clarity, with a sudden sense of direction, with the feeling that everything now makes sense and the path forward is obvious and clean. But it does not come that way. It comes quietly. It comes in small moments that you almost miss because you have spent so long bracing for disaster that you have forgotten how to recognize peace when it finally touches you. It comes in the morning, sometimes, when you wake up and realize that the first thought in your mind is not a worry dressed as a plan, not an old regret recycled as a reminder, not a familiar anxiety reaching for you before you are even fully awake. It comes as a kind of stillness that you did not earn through effort but through surrender. Through the act of finally putting down what you were never meant to carry forever. And in that stillness, something begins to grow. Something you may not have felt in a very long time. Something that has no grand name, no dramatic announcement. Just the quiet, unmistakable sense that you are, at last, beginning to live from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Epictetus, that man who began with nothing, who had his freedom taken from him before he ever had the chance to choose it himself. He understood something about this that most people who live comfortable lives never fully grasp. He understood that freedom is never a condition. It is a decision. And the most profound version of that decision is not the one you make about your external circumstances. It is the one you make about the stories you choose to inhabit. Because he knew, from his own lived experience, that a man can be chained on the outside and completely free on the inside. And he also knew the opposite is true, that a man can have every external freedom the world offers and still be a prisoner of his own unexamined beliefs, his own untested assumptions, his own carefully maintained lies. And the bars of that prison are invisible, which makes them more dangerous than any physical constraint. Because you cannot break what you refuse to see. You cannot dissolve what you insist on protecting. And so the first act of true freedom, the kind that Epictetus gave his entire life to teaching, is simply this. Look. Look honestly at what you are holding. Look honestly at what you have been telling yourself. Look at the distance between who you are presenting yourself to be and who you actually are in the private hours of your own life. Not to condemn that distance. Not to collapse under the weight of it. But to see it clearly. Because clarity, even painful clarity, is always kinder than the slow erosion of a comfortable lie. And here is where I want to speak to something that I believe lives in almost every person who reaches a certain age, who has lived enough to accumulate both beauty and regret in equal measure. There is a particular kind of lie that belongs to people who have loved deeply and lost something, a relationship, a version of themselves, a dream they carried for decades before quietly setting it down without ceremony. And that lie sounds like this: I am too old to begin again. Or, the best of my life has already happened. Or perhaps the most quietly devastating version of all: it would not matter now anyway. And I want to speak directly to that lie, with every ounce of honesty I have, because I believe it is one of the most costly falsehoods a human being can carry into their later years. Because it does not just rob you of the future. It reaches back and steals from the present. It makes every remaining day feel like an afterthought, like a conclusion that was written before the story was finished. And that is a tragedy not because of what it denies the world, but because of what it denies you. The peace that is still possible. The depth that is still available. The love, for others, for life, for yourself, that does not stop being real simply because time has passed. Marcus Aurelius, who lived under the crushing weight of running an entire empire while watching people he loved die and while managing his own failing body, wrote something in his private journals that I return to often. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Not to yesterday's regret. Not to tomorrow's uncertainty. To this. To now. To the breath you are taking in this exact moment, which is the only moment that has ever truly belonged to you." The lie tells you that you are defined by your worst moments. The truth says you are not. The lie tells you that the damage you have carried has made you less. The truth says it has made you deeper. The lie tells you that honesty is dangerous, that if people truly saw you, the real you, the unpolished you, the you that has stumbled and doubted and fallen and risen and fallen again, they would leave. But the truth, the one that becomes undeniable when you finally stop running from it, is that the version of you that has been broken and repaired, that has suffered and survived, that has made mistakes and lived to understand them, that version of you is not something to hide. It is something to honor. Because that is the version of you that is capable of genuine compassion. That is the version of you that can sit with another person in their pain without needing to fix it or explain it away, simply because you know what it feels like to sit in your own. And that capacity, that quiet, earned, unhurried capacity for true human presence, is not a consolation prize for a difficult life. It is one of the most rare and valuable things a person can offer the world. And it was forged, slowly, inside every honest moment of pain you ever allowed yourself to feel. Seneca wrote, "The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately." And I think about what that means for someone who has spent years inside the comfortable numbness of a lie they stopped questioning. It means this: the time for waiting is over. Not waiting for the perfect moment to be honest. Not waiting for the right circumstances to finally allow yourself to feel what you have been avoiding. Not waiting for someone else to give you permission to be real. The future, as Seneca knew, is never guaranteed. The only ground you can actually stand on is today. This conversation. This breath. This quiet, interior willingness to say, I am done being a stranger to myself. And when you make that decision, not with drama, not with a grand announcement, but with the simple, private dignity of someone who has finally decided to stop running, something in the universe responds. Not with trumpets, not with sudden transformation, but with a kind of alignment that begins to reveal itself slowly, the way the sky after a long storm reveals, inch by inch, the return of light. And I want to say one more thing before we close this reflection together, because I think it is the most important thing. When you begin to dismantle the lie, when you start to live with more honesty, more courage, more alignment between what you feel inside and what you allow to exist in your life, you will encounter resistance. Not only from the world, which has grown accustomed to the version of you that was safe and predictable and never asked too much of anyone, but from yourself. From the part of you that built the lie in the first place. That part of you will argue. It will rationalize. It will tell you that you are being dramatic, that things were fine, that you are opening wounds that were better left closed. And you need to know that this resistance is not a sign that you are making a mistake. It is a sign that you are finally, after a very long time, doing something real. Because real things have weight. Real things require something of us. And the discomfort of that requirement is not evidence of danger. It is evidence of life. Of the kind of alive that goes beyond simply existing. The kind of alive that remembers what it felt like to be fully present in your own story, not watching it from a careful, protected distance. And that aliveness, that return to the full, unguarded, honest experience of being human, that is what waits on the other side of the lie. Not perfection. Not the absence of difficulty or pain or uncertainty, but the profound, irreplaceable freedom of no longer needing to maintain something that was never true to begin with. If something in this reflection has stayed with you, if you are sitting right now with a feeling that you cannot quite name but that you recognize, deep in your chest, as something real and important, I want you to know that you are not alone in it. And I want to invite you, one more time, to subscribe to this channel and leave your like. Not as a transaction, but as an act of connection. Because every time you do that, you send this kind of reflection further into the world. You put it in front of someone who is sitting exactly where you were sitting at the beginning of this video. Someone who needed, more than they could have said out loud, to hear that their truth, however long it has been hidden, still matters. Still has power. Still has the capacity to set them free. And I left something for you in the comments. A small book, gentle and unhurried, that walks through exactly what we have been touching here today. If you want to continue this reflection in your own time, in your own silence, at your own pace, you will find it there waiting for you without any pressure and without any expectation. Just an open door, for those who feel ready to walk through it. And so we close here. Not with answers, because the most important questions a human being can ask do not end in answers. They end in a different quality of living. A different relationship with silence. A different willingness to sit inside the truth of one's own life without flinching. We close with this. The lie was never the truest thing about you. It was only the shelter you built in a storm. And the storm has passed. And the shelter served its purpose. And you are still here. Still breathing. Still capable of something genuine and deep and real. Maybe the bravest thing you will ever do is not something the world will applaud or even notice. Maybe the bravest thing you will ever do is simply this. One quiet morning, alone with yourself, deciding to finally be honest. With no audience. With no reward. With nothing to gain except the extraordinary, underrated, life-changing gift of knowing, really knowing, that you are no longer living inside something that was never true. That you are, at last, free. Not from difficulty. Not from loss or uncertainty or the inevitable ache of being human. But free from the one thing that was always, quietly, costing you the most. The lie you told yourself. The one you no longer need. The one you can put down now. Gently. Without guilt. Without ceremony. Like setting down a stone you carried so long you forgot you were holding it. Put it down. And feel, for the first time in a long time, How light your hands have become.